and welcome to Lesson 5 of GCSE History. Today we will be looking at an overview of the health unit on paper 2. So we're going to carry on from where we were last lesson. Please start the lesson by completing the knowledge quiz as normal on the Google form. Please press pause while you complete the quiz. Okay, so today we're going to focus in more detail at Paper 2, Unit A, Britain, Health and the People, from 1000 to the present day. So on the health unit, we look at how medicine and people's health had changed and developed since 1000. This means we look at change and continuity and how we came to the medical system we have today. So 1,000 years is a really long time. We need to make sure that we're looking at the bigger picture, spotting themes and patterns, as well as being able to give detail and example. And as I said last lesson, this course is divided into 4 sections. So we look at the medieval period, which is known as medicine stands still, because we do have some development, but not a lot. We then move on and look at the Renaissance, so the beginning of change. So this is where we see some improvements. People are starting to question some of the practices that they've been practicing previously. And we see the development of new ideas. We then move on and look at the period from 1750 to 1900, which is known as a revolution in medicine. Now, this is where even more new ideas come about. Before we move on and look at the modern medicine, so 20th century, even up until today, so present times, we'll look at the developments and the changes that have occurred to get us to where we are today. So if we look at the medicine stands still section, we look at the impact of religion in particular on medicine. We look at how public health is pretty much non-existent. We look at the different ideas they had about why you were ill and how best to help you. At this time, pretty much everything is centered around the ideas of religion and what the church said. We also look at this time at some improvements in medical knowledge that do begin to emerge. So we have the opening of universities and new ideas that begin to spring up with things like urine charts being used for the first time to help treat people. But at this time, medicine is still very much under the influence of the church. So when we move on to look at the Renaissance period, so Renaissance means rebirth of knowledge. So we look at discoveries in science and medicine with the role of individuals featuring heavily. We have Ambrose Parr, who pioneered new surgical treatments. We have Andreas Vesalius, who names every bone in the body. We then have William Harvey, who discovers that blood circulated around the body. In this period, we also see the Great Plague of 1665, and we will compare that with the Black Death and look at how medical knowledge and understanding had advanced and how people now understood that the disease could be passed from person to person, hence why many of the physicians at this time wore masks when they were visiting their patients. We then move on to look at the 18th and 19th centuries, known as the revolution in medicine. So this is where we see huge improvements in public health, with the government passing public health acts to improve people's living conditions. They start deciding to look at sewers and drains. They decide that we need rubbish collections. We also see the building of public toilets as well. There are now stipulations for what new houses have to have. And they also bring in a tax to help pay for these new improvements. We also see, again, the role of the individual coming up here, with Edward Jenner using the first vaccination. We have Louis Pasteur, who discovers that germs actually exist, that you don't just get ill for no reason. And we also then see huge improvements in anesthetics and antiseptics, thanks to people like Simpson and Lister. And then our final one, we look at modern medicine, so in the 20th century. Now, although this course says that the 20th century, we will look at stuff that goes past 2000. We look in particular at the impact war had on medical advancement, with the invention of the X-ray, the first attempts at plastic surgery to help injured troops. We also see the development of penicillin in this period, the setting up of the NHS as a free national health service. We see introduction of social reforms and welfare, as well as the discovery of Crick and Watson about DNA, which helps us better understand how the body and diseases even work. So, like we have in previous lessons, you'll be completing work on a Google Doc. Your first task is to read through the timeline. And then for each event, you need to decide whether it's to do with surgery, disease, or government. Now, an example of each of these has been done for you on the Google Doc. So please press pause while you complete this task. So now, using your completed timeline, look at all the ones or events that you have marked as disease or surgery, and explain how you think these would have impacted on people's health. Think about how they would help people. Think about how they would help the population as a whole. Okay, we're not looking for a huge essay. One peel paragraph will be enough, but you're talking more generically. How will these things help improve or even impact on people's health? What will they do? Try and give some detail in your answer. So use the events to help back up your point. So please press pause while you complete this task on the Google Doc. So we're going to focus a little bit more in this session about one particular invention that comes about, and it's related to smallpox. So smallpox was a deadly disease that killed thousands of people every year. It's a serious, highly contagious, and often life-threatening infection marked by a rash of round pocks or blisters on the face, arms, and legs. Smallpox spread from contact with infected persons, and it's believed that the disease came from crusaders or travellers that had contracted it in Japan, China, and India in the medieval period. Now, it was one of the biggest killers in the world. However, just 30 years ago, the World Health Organization declared that smallpox was extinct throughout the world. And this is in thanks to a doctor called Edward Jenner. Now, he is a country doctor who was around from 1749 to 1823, and he makes a link between cowpox and smallpox. He tests his theory on a child known as James Phipps, and he takes pus from a smallpox victim and infected Phipps. It's thanks to Edward Jenner that we have the term vaccination. So let's have a little look at what he did. So we start off with Jenner noticing that milkmaids never contracted smallpox. So he uses an observation. He then decides to inject a young boy with cowpox and then infect him with a dose of smallpox. Now, he finds that he never contracted the disease. We then move on, and this is where we have some more developments. The vaccination contained cowpox, meaning that the recipient would then not contract smallpox. And the reason it's called vaccination is because vacca is Latin for cow. That's the reason it is called a vaccination. So to help you a little bit more with what we're going to do, you're going to read about this story in a little bit more detail. So on the same Google Doc as earlier, read through the text and then answer the questions in 4 sentences. So you'll have some questions. So questions 1A to 1D are all about the first part of text, called Edward Jenner and the story of the first ever vaccine. And questions 2A to 2D are about opinions against a vaccination. I've also put up on the Google Classroom and the links on your Google Doc a short YouTube clip on Edward Jenner, which you can watch if you want. It might help you with this task. It might help you understand the story of the first ever vaccine a little bit more. So please press pause while you complete the task on the Google Doc. And your final task for today is to write an account, so the story of the smallpox vaccine. Now, this is a little bit more than a story. You need to be giving some evidence, you need to be giving some detail and a little bit of explanation. So you need to do this as 3 peel paragraphs. An idea for what to write for each paragraph is shown on the Google Doc. So you start off by telling us about Jenner and the cowpox. Your second paragraph should be on the experiment and the publication of his findings. You could also mention a bit about opposition in that paragraph as well. And then your final paragraph should be looking at the government support and the impact the vaccine had. Now, you can use information from the previous task, so that piece of text. To help you with this, you can watch the YouTube video as well. But the main thing you need to be doing with this question is writing what happened and how that led to a vaccine. So make sure you complete this task on the Google Doc entitled GCSE Lesson 5 Exam. When you have completed the work, please ensure you submit everything through the Google Classroom. Well done for your work today, and we will see you very soon.